Welcome. I would like to go ahead and start. My name is Jay Walker. I'm an associate professor of economics at Old Dominion University, and my plan is for the next few minutes to talk about how and when to apply for graduate school. Um, I am a Fulbright scholar. I went to Chile in 2020. I've been the program director here at Old Dominion University for 2 years, a full-time faculty member since 2012. It's starting to be a few years. I have 27 peer-reviewed journal applications. Most of my research is around labor or education issues. I speak English, Spanish, or French. And so I speak to a lot of students who are like those who are listening or who may be listening to this um, later on YouTube. But thank you for your interest. And if you're here, just feel free to type questions in the chat at any point. I'll probably, take those during the talk, or I will sort of stop the recording and then we can actually visit face to face after the fact. And so thank you, as I mentioned. So just to remind everyone, we do have a couple of upcoming events on October 21st at 12:30 Eastern Time. It's the same as New York City. We have a virtual open house where we'll talk about the application process at ODU and just other aspects of the program. And then in November, although I don't know quite the date yet, I just heard back from the 3 alumni students who are going to participate. We are going to have an alumni panel of students who came through our PhD program who are currently, through our master's program, who are currently in PhD programs, and to talk about their experience and what the transition was like. And so for those of you who are interested in doctoral study, that might be of interest to hear about how they prepared and how they think it's been going. And so without further ado, I will move into applying for graduate study in economics. And so personally, I am not saying that if you're thinking about enrolling in the spring semester that it's not still possible. We do have some students who are still waiting on assistantship decisions. But at this point, when you're looking at September, you really should be thinking about the fall. But best case scenario is you would be looking at 1 year or greater ahead of time in terms of planning. And I'll talk about why that is, but it's a process. I myself thought about it for like 2 to 3 years, but I was working full time, and I needed to take some classes as well, just because of what I had as an undergraduate. And so to underline this is something that is perhaps a little more surprising, especially for some students who look to come from developing economies. If you do not have money saved, you need to think about how you're going to pay for the application process. It's not just the arriving in the United States that is expensive, but application fees. As far as I know, most all universities charge applications fees. Taking the GRE, when I took it, was $150. I assume that it has probably gone up since then, but I doubt it has gone down. And then if you're a domestic or if you're able to, I might recommend, thinking about visiting campus, especially if it is a PhD granting institution, or you're thinking about your doctorate, just because you're going to live there for 4 to 5 years. And if you have the opportunity, it might give you an idea of like a fit if you're choosing between 2 programs. I receive questions and emails from people from all over. Contact programs for information and prepared. And generally speaking, a lot of the information or a lot of the questions that I get are for things that are on the website. But there are things that aren't quite there that I think is that are important. And you can tell when candidates contact you, like, have they done their homework? And that leads to the next point, like being professional. So like there's I would say the first hurdle is being admitted, but it is less difficult to be admitted. But the real hurdle for many students is receiving funding. And how you present yourself, whether you present yourself professionally, your emails, how you address people, like this can affect your likelihood of funding because you will be working with and working for faculty members. Many times you'll be working on research projects, and the ability to write professionally is important. And so I'm seeing this as like if a student does not present themselves professionally initially, how would they work with others later once they arrive at my university? And this happens everywhere. Study for the GRE. Don't envision this. My last recommendation before we get into the timeline part of it. It is expensive in terms of money to take the GRE. You don't want to have to take it twice. Many master's programs, it's not always. It's getting to where it's more optional. It's optional at ODU, where I am. If you have a 3.3 grade point average that is on a 4.0 level or higher, cumulative. But for a PhD, I do not believe it is optional at many universities, if any, at least from what I know. Now, there could be exceptions that I'm not aware of. Study and try to do as well as you can so you don't have to take it more than once. I myself prepared for at least a year. Again, I was working full time, but I did study here and there on nights and weekends. And so part one of the plan. And so here, May to September. And so I'm talking about approximately, looking at fall 2026 from now. So May 2025 to September 2025. This would be most appropriate in terms of trying to look for that fall 2026 start, right? And the steps that would be most appropriate to take during that time. Choosing where to apply. Look at fields of specialization, right? So if you want to work in macroeconomics or if you want to work in development, there are economists that work in development at Minnesota. If you want to do certain, study with certain professors, or if your interest is really in some kind of flavor or some kind of type of labor economics, there might be certain schools that are more adapt or more prepared for that. So you're investing in yourself, ultimately. Like this idea that you're going to either take 2 years for a master's degree or 4 to 6 years in a PhD, you should know what you're buying, what you're getting into. Is it going to be quantitatively heavy? So our master's program at ODU is really focused on quantitative skills and on learning R. We're getting people ready to go into PhD programs, to be ready to be a productive graduate research assistant, but we are more focused on that quantitative side. Is it policy focused, right? And so this might make a difference according to the mix of the faculty. And you can find this out from looking at websites and then course curriculum and comparing those. The time you invest now can make a difference in where you end up after the fact. Right? Is the culture collaborative or competitive? And so where I went to graduate, my doctoral work was collaborative. But there are certain universities that if you have a lot of people who are allowed in, but only a certain number of people are passed through comprehensive exams, that lends to a competitive environment. And that is different to spend 4 to 6 years in compared to others. Are you comfortable with that? Ultimately, I do think that funding probably will determine many people's decisions. It determined mine. I'll talk a little bit about my process when I was going through considering graduate school. It's been a few years, but I do think that the process is at least similar. It hasn't changed greatly. And you should ask programs where they have placed graduates. Many universities have this on their website, but I received this question, and I am glad to share it. We have done well in keeping up with what has happened to our students, and we know where they have gone. The location, Norfolk, Virginia is rather different than, if you were to go to Montana, the winters are much colder in Montana. Montana has some great economics departments, not necessarily just the University of Montana, but Montana State. Um, but that makes a difference, right? If you're coming from Asia, you might think about the West Coast just because of the ease of flying home relative to the East Coast, which is more easy to arrive to from, say, Africa or Europe, something like that. But we certainly have students from Asia at ODU as well. And so assess your fit. And so ultimately, I do think that you should apply to a range of programs. It would be my recommendation. I would love to see the people who are here, and I do recognize at least one or two of the names here, that's people who have already applied, but like you should apply to a range of programs. Like I'd love to see everyone end up in coursework at ODU for a master's degree, but I understand. You should think about fit as well as your goals, as well as the focus of the department. And so what is your GPA? And so realistically, some elite schools might not consider students who have below like a 3.5 or a 3.7 or something like that. Or how is your math background? Have you had real analysis? This was a conversation I have had in the last week. So we at the master's program at ODU don't anticipate students having had real analysis, but if you're applying to elite PhD programs, some of the highest ranking ones, they will have anticipated you're having real analysis, and you will probably need it your first year to get through those core classes. And so personally, I needed to, when I was preparing for graduate school, this was the couple of years I took courses part-time. I retook calculus 2. I took an additional statistics class to get myself in a position ready. I do think for some people, so if you're in the United States, taking classes part-time is much easier. But if you're international, if you're outside the United States, I think that you can still show some of that signal, perhaps with some online certificates, or I've talked to students about like Coursera before, because you can take short courses that are often free, like in Python or in R, something like that. And then ultimately, you can think about whether your goals, are they suited better for the master's degree or the PhD? Master's degree really is a stepping stone to either a PhD program or into industry. And so personally, our program at ODU, it's about 2/3 or so go into industry. They go to work for government or for private business. And then around a third, more or less, maybe a fourth, move into PhD programs. And so PhD programs are often for academics. According to where you want to be, like at a central bank, you might end up with a PhD, but it's really according to the role that you want and where you see yourself. Like if you really want to work on academic research in an academic setting, a PhD would likely be necessary. But we just had a recent graduate who placed at the Bank of Thailand, right? So we do have people who work for central banks. There was another alumni from a few years ago who ended up, I'm not claiming that this will happen to you, as the chair of the central bank, or the president of the central bank in the Middle East, which we're particularly proud of. But that person also continued and got a PhD, past our master's program. And so it is possible according to what you want to do. And so again, for my people in here, if or when you have questions, feel free to let me know. And so in this first phase, and this is something I think I could have done better, but I did have a short list. I was really geographically focused in the Southeast because that is where I'd always lived. I wish I would have opened that up some more and applied in the West or the Northeast, maybe even internationally. Think about a mix, right? So like a program that you would love to get into, a high ranked program, the program where you think you're the best fit, and then like maybe a safety program, a program where you would still go if you got funding or if they gave you the best offer. I personally, when I applied for a PhD, I applied to around 12 programs. This again goes back to that savings. You know, at ODU, it's about $50 to apply. And so $50 times 12 is a few. Some schools do offer waivers. But if you're thinking about a master's program, I would recommend, more than one. Again, not that I wouldn't want to see you if you're thinking about the master's at ODU, but it's realistic. Like if it's your dream to get graduate education or have receive a master's degree, you should diversify and try to make sure you have that opportunity. Two, and this was something that I really, it was the start of a process that I eventually improved upon in graduate school, but create something that tracks deadlines. Like as you have a school that you think might be of interest, have the name, have a website link, put in this is when that application is due, what is required, and contact information. You might be able to remember this after the fact, but it is much easier when you're searching through these things to just have it there. Right. So bookmark websites, application pages, faculty lists. Right. And so this is all investigating earlier. So later you have the information at your fingertips, or it's easier to access when you're writing your application. Okay. And so get organized. So I personally used a spreadsheet. Google Docs, of course, is online. Program information. What is the words that it asks for statement of purpose? Does this program have a GRE waiver or not? At least for a master's degree, it's possible that you might get a GRE waiver, and start thinking about recommendations. And so again, this is still around now that you should be thinking about, well, who can I ask for recommendation letter? The applications won't come due until around the end of the year, so like around December. And so if you're thinking about a fall 26 start, again, we're about 3 months ahead of when those are going to start to come. But you should have some idea about the things that you need to do by which dates. And your idea is that you want to stand out. My assumption is any school you apply to, it's in the United States, in Europe, or your home country if you're outside of the United States, they're going to have more people applying than there are seats available. And so you want to stand out. And some of those ways is just easy things, right? Think about grammar. Did you address the person with the correct name? You should personalize some of these things. It's a big investment on your part. And so put the time in initially so that when it comes time for assistantship awards, then that likelihood will show up, right? So like you will have presented your best face, the best appearance. Okay. And so here's like up until around now. It's not to say that there's not time if you're looking at fall 26, but it's easier if you would have gotten that started. And so part 2 of planning, September to October. Okay. Prior year to start date. And so again, looking at a fall 26 start, you should really be thinking about when you're going to take the GRE if you have to take it. If you're looking at an MA, it could be optional based on your grades as an undergraduate. I was talking to someone earlier who recommended taking, it was just this last week, about taking the GRE in like August instead of taking it in October. And I thought that was a reasonable case. But again, so like we're a little past August now, but the idea is you need to prepare. Personally, when I was preparing for the GRE, I studied on like the weekends when my friends were doing things, or at night sometimes, even though I was tired after work. And it just took me a long time relative to if you're still a student and you can focus. But you do need to prepare, right? Use prep books, websites, and courses are expensive, but especially for PhD programs, top scores on quantitative or on the quantitative section of the GRE will make a difference in your likelihood of getting funded. If you take it in October, you can retake it in November if you need to with scores. And there are lots of forums online that talk about what scores are needed. Okay. And so letters of recommendation. So do not surprise the people that you are going to ask letters of recommendation in like December. Give them some time. Ask in early October or soon. Think about what professors or supervisors know your academic work. And so, personally, if you're thinking about a PhD, I recommend at least one academic, someone who was your instructor previously, who can speak about your research potential or your ability to serve as a research assistant. Now, if it's a master's degree, I think that's less important, simply because, like, a professional reference, not your mother, not a cousin, but someone who knows you from a professional setting, is okay. I do think that academic settings are typically good, but I think professional, if you can only, if it's like, oh, I've got a boss, I've been working there for 3 years, I think that's more than okay. And to each recommender, I always ask for resume. Personally, when someone asks me for a letter of recommendation, but if I got all of these things, I would be very happy, because this also allows me to help the person who's asked me for a letter of recommendation with my opinion. So share your resume, your CV, the transcript, if they don't have access to your transcript, a draft of your statement of purpose, that's SOP, and the program list. Personally, like when I have students who are applying in the United States out of our master's program, sometimes I will know people, or I will know other people in our department know people at those universities. And I'll say, go talk to this person. They might be able to put a call in on your behalf. And I do know with many of our graduates, that has either helped them in work or be admitted to program. Right. And I think this is true. Discuss your school list. Right. Do you know? Can you help me when you talk to your people for recommendation? These are all just tips. And again, as we go through, if you have questions, please feel free to let me know. And so here's one. Let's come in. And so, how early should students decide if they want to pursue graduate school in economics? How should they decide if they're ready or they're appropriate for it? Whew, that's a good question. I think that's difficult. If you're an undergraduate, I mean, earlier is better, but many times this decision happens between your third and your fourth year. So, like, between your next to final undergraduate year and your final undergraduate year. For me personally, I think it was more that I wanted to be on a college campus. Like, I knew that a university was a comfortable place, and I loved taking classes. I didn't think that an undergraduate degree was enough for me. Um, and for me, when I think about interest and grades, ultimately that was what told me that the doctorate was what I'd hoped to do. Like, I loved the idea of being a professor. It was sort of like my life dream. And, there are days when I'm upset, but it's still the best job that I could have ever gotten. And so on some level, it was just the interest in education, in higher education personally. That's why I ended up. Thank you for that question. I can keep going too if someone wants me to clarify more. Part 3 of planning, finalizing and submitting. So November to January. So before you submit, and so again, you've now gotten an Excel file or a Google document where you're tracking what's needed for each application, what is due. Is the application form complete? Transcripts are sent. Oh, something for some of you international students who may be watching today or listening. You may need to get your, I cannot think of the word of what it is, your transcript. If it's from a non-US institution, you may need to get it, and I think it's called confirmed, or to have it translated sometimes is the word. But I think it's like the World Transcript Service or something. If you search a couple times online, this is just a hurdle that you may have to have. Thank you, Ibrahim. The WES evaluation. This is the nice thing. Sometimes people will help you. Okay. And in the second person, uh, transcript evaluation by World Education Services. I don't always see this in every application we get at ODU, but I think it is required according to which institution it is. And that's where, with time, you could contact institutions and talk to them about like what is required and which ones are needed. But many times this will be needed. Again, this is where savings might be useful simply because it's something else you will have to pay. Okay. So transcripts, even though these are like they've been evaluated, they may not have to be official. So that can come only if you want to matriculate or if you're accepted. And that's often the same with GRE scores. The main thing is just to have them available. You would get unofficial results almost right away that you can then use with applications, but you then may have to send them officially later. Are letters uploaded or confirmed? And every bit of this is easy when you have more time. Right. So like applications are open for us for next fall now. It's the beginning of September. And our due date for a master's degree is like the 1st of March. But if you start talking about PhD programs, many of those are like January 1st or January 15th, sometimes even the beginning of December or mid-December. This is where your spreadsheet, very important, right? Okay. And to make sure in proof. So if there's one thing that everyone's going to look at, your resume, and they're also going to get a statement of purpose, right? And so AI can help with this, but it's really good to make sure these things are in your voice. Like when I can tell that AI wrote things, personally, it's a turn on. And I suspect that other people who are making these decisions feel similarly. Okay, deadline. Most applications mid-December, early January. I would recommend one of my favorite students from the last few years. I was getting like the email requests for recommendation letters the day before the deadline. The student ended up in another graduate program, I think successful, but it had to be stressful. When I get asked for these letters, not everyone will be able to do it as quickly. Some professors are slower, right? So just think, have a fake deadline. When you know there have to be letters that have to be requested, make sure that these things are in. Earlier is better or easier. And don't submit in a panic. Okay, so one question that just came. Is the GRE necessary for master's or is it only the doctorate? So it depends. It's a great economist answer, I know. I apologize for responding that way. It is a trend in the United States that master's programs will offer waivers for the GRE. So, for example, I can speak for my program. So, like at ODU, a waiver is available if a student's cumulative GPA undergraduate was 3.3 or higher on a 4.0 scale. So it could be necessary for a master's degree according to where you want to apply, according to what your grades were. But some of this will depend, like you can see where these waivers are available in your research of programs. If it is PhD, I feel pretty certain you're going to need to take the GRE. This is just from conversations I have with other colleagues and with students who have moved on. You should be planning on the GRE. And so if I did not respond to that question sufficiently, please let me know. So part 4, February to approximately August. Results in the transition. Okay, so hurry up. You've got all this done. It was this huge run up. Um, January decisions take a while. There are committees, professors takes a while to coordinate them. And so decisions normally come out like February to April. And funding, and I think this may be the next slide, there is a loosely, or maybe it's more than loose, there is at least a consortium of universities in the United States that recommend not making due dates for assistantship funding be before April 15th. And so that is our initial deadline. So at least like decisions on admission, my university, just as an example, they come quickly because we do rolling admissions, which means we just process them when they come. But if you're applying for fall, somewhere around the 1st of April or so, try to have offers out so students will have a few days. Sometimes, many times, and I try to do this. I know other universities did because I was waitlisted. If you aren't selected for either admission or for funding, you can send an update. Like you, as a student, can send an update. Like I am still interested. You know, I would love to hear what is going on, and compare offers. And so this is some of the benefit. And I've got a question up that I'll respond to in a moment. You know, I applied to like 12 schools personally, right? I received fund admission to 7, I think, something like that, a little over half. I got funding offers, and I believe 3. And it was comparison, which was the best fit. Where did I want to live, and where had graduates gone to work? And so it's great when you can compare that sort of thing. And so this is where this preparation comes. And so we've got Ibram, who has another question. It's like, what if I meet the requirement for the waiver? Will it decrease my chance of admission and funding if I don't take it? So this is a good question. All else equal, the nice economist term, I think at the margin, having the GRE is better. So you might be able to get through the process without it. But when I see good GRE scores, this makes me think this is someone who's clearly thinking about graduate school. This is someone who's taken the time to prepare. And it also signals to me that they're probably applying to numerous universities, which is, you should be. So I always make a note of it. I do think now, my opinion, so this is just what I see in the applications that arrive at ODU. The majority of students who qualify for the waiver have not taken the GRE. It's expensive, and it's in terms of time and money. We have made assistantship offers without the GRE. But it is a signal. So also normally when I see students who apply to our master's program, that makes me probably think that they're applying to PhD programs as well. And that's entirely possible, and you should consider that. And so that's a personal question, like time, money, effort. Like, do you have the time to invest in doing so? If you have enough time to invest in the process, I think it could help you. If you're looking at a hopeful fall start, you may not have time to adequately prepare for the GRE. And so that's a personal thing. And so hopefully that responded to your question. well enough? If not, just add some in the chat and I will continue. Um, when I planned on taking the GRE, I knew it was a doctoral program I was going for, so I planned and prepared with that in mind. I understand that many students may not have had that length of time to prepare. Uh, yes, and so I was trying to think about if there was anything there to add, but hopefully that was a reasonable response. So, with that done, ready to go? I put exclamation point, question mark, might be the other one. Notify programs of your decision. And so April 15th is the typical deadline with funding um, on whether or not you signal, like, will you accept the assistantship offer or not. Here, you're going to have paperwork, you're going to have visa appointments, you're going to have lots of other things that you need to complete moving through the process. If you start in the fall, and this was something I personally wish that I would have thought to do more, I probably should have reviewed some economics and mathematics over the summer coming into the doctoral program. According to which one, I do think that our program at ODU, we're planning on, if you've had the prerequisite courses, our goal is to get you ready to either start a PhD program or move into the labor force as like an applied analyst, like a data analyst, or move into government industry using the skills that we have helped you prepare. But even with that said, I do think that some students who really want to try to go to top programs, I will coach them into trying to take some extra math courses that we don't require or that wouldn't naturally come as part of the program. Like there's one student who I think is at least going to sit in on a real analysis course, not for a grade, just because, but he's just going to be able to say, like, I sat through the course, like he's going to be able to talk about that in some of his applications later. And so, is there anything else you would like to know? Let's see here. I think I had one question. So, how would you rank GRE scores, GPA, math background, letters of recommendations, and research experience in importance for graduate school applications? And so this is kind of related to that discussion about the GRE scores from the question I just had. Thank you for that. This may not be fair, but oftentimes what happens is it's easy to rank on GPA. And from there, then we start talking about assistantship. I like it when I can tell students continued to work or, they've been preparing. So even if your grades aren't good, the statement of purpose can help because you're like, I have this explanation. We had one application for the spring semester where one applicant's grades were not as good in two or three couple key courses. They addressed it in their statement of purpose, and they had clearly also talked to their advisor about it or one of their recommenders because in their recommendation letter it discussed it, and I thought it was a nice plan. They're like, well, I didn't do as well in this one course, but it wasn't part of my curriculum. I took it purposefully because I wanted to be exposed to that. And I was like, oh, well, that was nice. So I do think that GPA matters, GRE scores, those quantitative measures. At the end of the day, I am an economist and I sort of like those. But I like letters of recommendation. If you were an undergraduate math major and your GPA is lower, like clearly you took a series of courses that are difficult, that's a signal to me, right? Or if you have worked on a research, like did you do a research project or present externally? Like these are skills that we're going to try to work on with students, I think, and everywhere else as well. And so if you already have worked on those, that helps. Let's see. So I like this question. This one just came in. So if you've got a question or two, feel free to type it in. But if I could go back and change one thing in my own timeline or in my own preparations, what would it be? I think that I probably would have liked to have researched more about the universities when I was before I applied. And I think I should have spoken with my advisors because I did speak with like my undergraduate advisor and I'd spoke to a couple of other people about different universities, but I would like to have understood exactly what it meant. Right. And so trying to speak to people who've gone down the path that you want to take. And so that's where I think looking for a mentor can be important. Can you talk to someone who's gotten the degree, who works at the place, who's graduated from the school, if you're an international student, who's gone to study abroad in the field that you want to study in? I think you can get a lot of good advice that way. Um, yeah. I just this semester I've been trying to work on getting mentors for our master's students, and it was a lot. It was work to get that done, but I think that there's a real value in that, and so I'm kind of maybe overly focused, or I'm pretty focused on mentoring at the moment. And so, as far as that goes, that was my main part of the presentation. Please, if you don't already, follow us on LinkedIn. I think, at least from the names that I'm seeing in the participants, I think many of you do. I have updates, or we have updates about application due dates internally and sort of externally. Like, hey, are you doing this? If you're thinking about grad school, and then we've got information about our department and students and alumni information. Um, okay, so another good question just came in. I'll go back. Well, I'll leave it on the QR code. What about certifications and skills? Do they help when admission committees are reviewing an application? And so I personally think so. This shows when I see this in an application or when I've continued to have conversations with students who've applied, and I see a name or two here that I recognize from people I've traded emails with over months and over time. Um, the the continued work that it takes to get a certificate, even if you've already gotten your degree, that's some of the same work that you'll have to do, like especially in a PhD, or it's sort of like self motivation that I think is good. Um, yes. So those certifications and skills, like that you continue to work or that you've continued to work on learning R, or other softwares. There are other softwares. Our program's just focused on R. I think has value, and it is something that we look at when we're considering assistantship offers and decision, because it to me signals, and this is really what some of that question decision is about assistantship. Can this student come in and be effective? Could they help a faculty member on a research project? Class management, if you're helping to grade and tutor, that's different. Many of applicants will have done that as undergraduate, and that's still great. That makes a difference. I mean, we look for that, but that experience with research, I do think makes a difference. In the certifications and skills, I'm sorry, uh, where you're talking about that. So hopefully I responded to that question. Good. Okay. I'll pull up my last slide. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now, if I can find the right button. It's here.